Hello, everyone. Welcome to StudyTravel TV Live, a show of news, statistics, and opinion. I'm Matthew Knott, news editor of StudyTravel Magazine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nicola Hancock, editor of StudyTravel Magazine. Before we get started, for the best viewing experience, please put the call-in side-by-side speaker view. You will see an icon in the top right corner where you can select the view.
We are delighted to welcome you all to today's broadcast of StudyTravel TV Live. We'll start with a news story, and then we'll be joined by our guest this week, Ilse Liebenberg, Marketing Director of International House Cape Town and Chair of ELT Association Education South Africa, and Haitam Giat, founder of Yes Atlas Agency, located in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE.
We'll also have a clip of a pre-recorded interview with Darren Conway, Managing Director of Languages International and Chair of English New Zealand. If you have any questions for the presenters or guest speakers, or any comments on the stories, please do post them in the chat box below and we will read them out at the end. A big thank you to the sponsor of this episode, Londonist.
Okay, then let's take a look at our first story. And member schools of ELT Association Education South Africa, or EduSA, recorded some recovery in 2021 with 5,567 students welcomed, a 71% increase compared with the pandemic-affected 2020, although still below typical pre-COVID levels of around 10,000 students.
Saudi Arabia was one of the key factors in the growth, with 1,259 students, an increase of almost 200% compared with the previous year. Ilse Liebenberg, Chair of EduSA and our guest today, said that Saudis were granted visa-free access just before the pandemic, which was a factor in the recovery after South Africa's borders reopened in October 2020.
A number of European countries also recorded an increase in 2021 for Education South Africa members, including France, Italy, and Switzerland. African markets also performed well with a 40% increase overall.
However, Latin American markets struggled, and Brazil, traditionally one of the largest source countries for South Africa, decreased by 45% in 2020.
Okay, so at this point, we'd like to introduce our guests, Ilse and Haitam.
Hello.
Hello, guys.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Ilse, it's great to see some recovery for South Africa's ELT schools last year. Most of the English language destinations that we have reported on had decreases in students last year. So how did South Africa manage a 70% increase?
I think it's got a lot to do with how we handled the pandemic as a country. As you mentioned, with our borders opening in October of 2020 already, I think it was a very welcoming effect that people could start slowly and surely trickling in again. We also saw a major increase, as it was mentioned, in our African market. And, you know, we found that the African market was still traveling. It's a longer term student as well. So that played an effect. And then, of course, as we mentioned, the Saudi Arabian market, being able, you know, they can arrive for 3 months without a visa and extend for another 3 from within the country quite easily. So I think if you take all those factors into consideration, we managed to really, you know, get back in the game. There were a few setbacks which made it that we didn't actually increase as much as we would have liked to, with Omicron hitting in, I think it was December of the year. But however, other than that, I think, yes, open borders made a big difference.
Thank you. And Haitam, we heard that Saudi Arabia was an important factor in the growth. So what makes South Africa an attractive destination for Saudi students, do you think? And do you see this kind of growth continuing?
Yes, I agree with Liz. It's about like how the country handled the COVID, and we have two destinations that we witness growth. One of them is South Africa, and the second UK. So South Africa handled the border very well, and they welcomed students at early stage, and that was fine from our side. Like we tripled our numbers comparing even to 2019. So why South Africa? It could be good reasons, like good quality schools, the prices is still competitive, and a lot of Saudi students, they want to escape the extremely hot weather during the summer, and they want to cold weather in South Africa. That's like a good reason. And of course, the visa waiver helped a lot. Another point, I think we have less Saudi students in South Africa comparing to other destinations. So it's a good market, you know, it's like a different nationality, mix of nationality. So it's good for our students.
Thank you. Yeah, and yeah, as we've just kind of talked about there, Saudi Arabia does seem to have been one of the most resilient source markets during the COVID-19 pandemic, still traveling. And as you've said, was the top source country for the UK as well as South Africa. So why do you think this was? And was that mostly sort of privately funded business or scholarship students?
Yeah, no, Saudi Arabia closed the border for almost 2 years. And generally Saudis, they love to travel. So once the border opened, I think all in April, May, fully opened, they just used the opportunity just to travel everywhere. And we noticed that in our business, our number, we did 85% comparing to 2019. That's even more than what we expected, okay? So the visa waiver to the UK helped a lot with that. And also like the hunger to travel. So use the opportunity just to travel and study something abroad.
Thank you. And Ilse, we've heard also about the 2021 data just then. Bring us up to speed and tell us what's happening this year so far.
Well, I think I'd go as far as to say that this year has been even bigger in terms of recovery. We've definitely become a more prominent market for the European market, where usually member schools, we'd have 2 or 3 that feature highly amongst the Europeans. It seems to be spreading a bit more amongst the members. So as far as we're going at the moment, I would say that it's definitely seen an even more upwards turn. I don't have the statistics yet for the third quarter, but I know that the first 2 quarters of members numbers are looking really, really high, unfortunately, during the pandemic, which probably leaves a slight case of, you know, the same size of the pie, but less slices. No, the other way around. And yeah, but I think it's all looking good. It's all positive. It's all just going forward, and we're just having to buckle up and keep going.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Right, let's move on to our next story. And the government of New Zealand has announced that it plans to reintroduce the export education levy on providers from January 2023 at the same rate as before the pandemic. The levy was suspended during COVID-19.
The export education levy is used to fund activities relating to the education export industry and reimbursements for international students in the event of programme or provider closure.
The levy is set at 0.50% of tuition for universities, institutes of technology and polytechnics, and schools, and at 0.89% for private training establishments, including English language schools.
Education New Zealand also announced a review of its recognised agency scheme, with any changes due to be shared with the sector by early next year.
So I spoke to Darren Conway, the chair of English New Zealand, about the English language school sector response to this development, and here is a clip from that interview. We've just heard about the levy there, which is looking to come back in January 2023. The government's looking at. So, what's your reaction to that, Darren?
Look, the English language industry and the international education industry as a whole, in fact, are all pretty angry about the idea that the government's even considering it at this point. Yeah, it's just not a welcome cost or distraction at the moment as we're all trying to get back on our feet.
What were you hoping for? That it would be delayed in another year, or what would your suggestion to the government be?
Look, our first reaction is we got a week's consultation on it for a start. You know, every other consultation of any kind of significance they do 6 weeks to 2 months on. So they kind of try to slip it in really quickly on us, like a done deal. So, you know, it's a typical government consultation, non-consultation consultation. Or as, you know, I recall one government person once saying to me, some people confuse consultation with negotiation. It's a sham. So firstly, it would have been nice to have had longer consultation about it. Secondly, it would have been nice to have known, to think that they would have had more consideration of the circumstances that we're in. You know, we are recovering, and our sector, the English language sector, is recovering pretty quickly indeed, you know, as we always suspected that we would. We hope we would. But that doesn't mean that we, you know, we're in a good position yet. You know, we've got 2 years of very little or no cash coming in to recover from. So the thought of having to, you know, divert what cash we do have into essentially useless expenditure in the new year is not at all welcome. And it's not in any way going to enhance our ability to meet government's goals, which are, you know, to further develop a high quality industry. If we're spending money on dead weight costs, we can't spend that money on providing a better experience for students. You know, it's just stupid.
Okay, so also clearly the English language schools in New Zealand, they aren't happy with that move. What support, if any, have schools in South Africa had from the government during the pandemic?
Absolutely none, to be honest. Nothing, none and less. No. You know, I think this is something that's been coming along for the South African industry for quite some time. It's just purely getting recognized as an industry by our government. It's an ongoing struggle that we've had. I'm not sure if you recall in 2016 when Johannes Kraus was chairperson, they had a court case against the government, the Department of Higher Education and Training, and Home Affairs. And only to say that in 2020, 2021, and now this year, we've come to exactly that again, where we're trying to get the recognition of just for study visas. So no, unfortunately, we're not in any position to get any kind of support at this point in time.
And in our recent story on the Education South Africa 2021 data, you alluded to some battles with the government, as you've just mentioned, on study visas. Yeah. So has there been any movement here at all?
So we managed to have our first proper day in court, and the judge heard our case because basically it's a matter of accreditation, where our Department of Higher Education and Training has decided that the body that we're accredited with is no longer sufficient for you to be registered with the Department of Education. And that leaves us in a lurch, because where do we then get accredited? South Africa doesn't have its own English language accreditation body or quality assurance body at the moment. So we went back to court to try and convince the Department of Higher Education and Training that we do, in fact, qualify as what is known as a learning institution in South Africa, which should then give Home Affairs the go-ahead to provide us with study visas. Now, we had an interim order given to us, which we very delighted as, because it gave us everything that we asked for. But it's not a final order as yet. So that's where we stand. We've had a lot of backlog, of course, due to COVID with visas, mostly within the Central African and African markets. But we are slowly seeing an upturn. It seems that the backlogs are being dealt with, and embassies are getting to the point where they've realized that all of the interim order is giving us our accreditation until at least July next year. If not full, then further and longer. So it's slight light at the end of the tunnel as it stands now.
Okay, well, fingers crossed.
Thank you.
In my interview with Darren, the full version of which you can find on our website on the news page or on the STtv live page, he talks about the recovery of the sector there since the full reopening a few weeks ago. Haitam, has demand for New Zealand recovered for your agency?
Unfortunately, no. The border were closed for a long time, and many schools still closed in New Zealand, and that affected the business. We are 10% in numbers, or 10% comparing to 2019. So there is almost no recovery. Now what happened with the UK and South Africa visa waiver, I think it will be very competitive, and we'll see very slow recovery to New Zealand.
All right, thank you very much.
Sorry for the news.
Right, let's take a look at our next story then. Last week, English UK held its annual marketing conference in London, focusing on topics including key source markets, agent relations, anti-racism, and the recovery through 2022 of the wider tourism industry.
Yes, Saudi Arabia and the GCC countries were one of the main panel sessions there, with discussions including the importance of visiting agencies in person in the region, the role of social media influencers, and word of mouth advocacy from existing students.
Panelists also commented on the immediate impact of Saudi Arabia becoming a visa waiver country for the UK on demand and inquiries. Visit Britain presented findings from research on traveller sentiment in 29 key markets, showing those in Saudi Arabia had the highest propensity to visit the UK ahead of India and the USA.
Haitam, let's pick up on a couple of those themes if we can. In your opinion, how should schools best work with agencies in the region?
Okay, good question. I agree with most of the points that they mentioned. In my personal level, and always advise the schools to visit the offices and build like a strong relationship with the counselors, because the counselors, once they meet the school representative, they commit to numbers and they build a strong relationship with the school reps. So always meet the counselor face to face, not only the CEO, general manager, or the business owner. So we need to speak with the actual counselors. And it's a good idea to have them in your social media, stay in touch from time to time, on occasions. So that's the most important thing. Second, schools should respond fast. Saudi market or the GCC market, it's not like Japan or other countries. They don't plan things 6 months ahead. They plan to travel like within 1 to 2 weeks. So schools should respond fast to the application, to response. They should understand the requirement of the accommodation for the Saudi students, understand some of the terminology, like what's halal food, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and of course, provide like good accommodations options. That's my advice. So you are welcome to visit our offices and speak to our counselors. I always encourage you guys to see the culture, understand the cultures. And last thing before I forgot, to work with Saudi, some schools are trying to do like a direct sales from the UK. So that's a very challenging thing, and you cannot expect from agent to support you when you do it at the same time like a direct sale. So you either decide you want to go for direct sales, okay, and do it by yourself, or you work with your partner and trust your agents and work with the agents very close.
Yeah, very, very detailed advice. Thank you.
The panelists talked about social media influences as well and their growing impact on the promotion of study abroad and schools. Is this something that can lead to more direct bookings, or can agencies harness these trends themselves? Do you as an agency, Haitam, use influencers at all in your social media promotions?
We haven't, but we started last week, and actually tonight we have an influencer going live and trying to promote us. It's a new trend. It's new channel of marketing. We always use the social media and Google AdWords, but of course the impact of an influencer is growing, and it's something that we should try. If you ask me in a couple of months, I will give you results if it's good or not, but hopefully, yes. It is expensive thing to do, you know, but hopefully we'll get good results.
Oh, I'd like to hear how that goes. Yeah.
Ilse, as we've already mentioned on the show, Saudi Arabia was very important for South Africa in 2021. And the ratio of agent-based recruitment from the Middle East for EduSA schools in 2021 was around 81%, I think, compared with about 49% overall for all markets. So how do Education South Africa schools maintain relations with agents in the region?
I think a few important factors to consider is that South Africa, or I would say specifically Cape Town, has quite a big Muslim community, so which makes us very understanding of the culture, of things like Haitam mentioned, halal food, the type of accommodation, the culture, and things like that. So, you know, we're in a position to place students within Muslim families, within walking distance from some of the schools. In terms of dealing with agencies, we do have quite a few contingent of Saudi Arabian agencies that are actually based in Cape Town as well. And as an EduSA, as a body, we decided that in order to curb this from getting out of hand, we require that our schools deal only with agencies that are actually registered businesses. That it's not a past student that comes and says, he now would like to recruit on your behalf. So we've had to do that and just put some restrictions in place. And other than that, we to curb the issue that Haitam mentioned about agencies versus direct bookings. I know that quite a few of the schools will take on one partner, make that their most trusted partner, and if they get direct bookings, actually divert the booking to the agent. We have found that at times that tends to solve problems of understanding the culture, understanding the need of the Saudi Arabian market, and I think that's also part and parcel why Saudi Arabia then is preferring South Africa as a whole as a destination, because there's understanding and understanding for the culture and the lifestyles.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, we'll take one last story to finish then. A number of International Education Association initiatives and collaborations have been announced in the last couple of weeks.
Yes, English USA has announced Japanese Agency Association JAOS as its latest strategic partner. Last year, as part of a strategy to expand influence overseas, English USA partnered with 4 Latin American agency associations. In a separate development, English USA also received a grant from the US Department of Commerce to develop Latin American markets.
Meanwhile, the International Association of Language Centres, or IALC, announced the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding with Thai agency association TIECA, who were guests on our last broadcast.
And in other association news, English Australia was successful in winning 2 partner project grants from the Government of New South Wales to diversify international student recruitment and develop EdTech solutions.
Ilse, are these sorts of collaborations or MOUs between agency and educator associations something that Education South Africa has looked to expand?
Most definitely. We've only now come into a position in the last couple of months from a budgetary perspective that we can start up our marketing initiatives again. So we had Gavin Eyre attend Gala and Alfie. I'll be attending ISEF in Berlin, along with the Quaylen Symposium, along with Gala meetings. So we do definitely, there's a definite importance on that we place on that. I think there's a lot of positive things that can come out of it.
And Education South Africa actually signed an MOU with Brazilian Agency Association Belter back in 2016 when Johannes was the chair.
Yes.
Were there any sort of concrete results from that?
Well, I think if you look at market share, I know we focused on the Saudi Arabian market share, but if you look at the Brazilian market share prior to the pandemic, it was one of our highest markets. And I do definitely think that there's a benefit in the Belter agents becoming aware of us as a destination, being informed about South Africa and Cape Town. And I would say there is definitely a great improvement. There was a great improvement in the market at the time. Just a pity now that we're sitting with flights issues and things like that.
Great, thank you. And Haitam, we don't really see many national agency associations in the Gulf region where you're based. Are there any moves to develop any agency associations there? And is this something that you would welcome as an agency?
Okay, if you ask a question why we don't have it, so the answer, it's illegal. You can't do association in the GCC countries. That's the reason. But unofficially, we have like a group of solid agents that we are in a WhatsApp group, and we meet from time to time to discuss like common issues and how we could improve our business and how we should handle some challenges with educators, but not official association.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting.
So that brings us up to date with all of the stories this week. And at this point, we'd like to open up to the audience to see if there are any questions for our guests or for the StudyTravel team. These can be on any of the stories or topics we have discussed today. Looks like we've got one there.
We do. It's a question for Haitam. Do Saudi students go abroad to study just the English language course, or do they tend to continue onto degree programs at universities? And are they mostly sponsored by government scholarships, or are they self-funded?
Okay, from where the question, which country?
It's from Anthony. I don't know if you could tell us whereabouts you're based, Anthony, or if it's just a general.
Okay, so to understand, Saudi has two markets, the self-funded and the sponsored students. Sponsored students, mainly they go to study English and then continue with higher education. The self-funded, the largest market, the share market in the self-funded, it's in the summer, and it's for short to mid courses, like 8 to 12 weeks. And we still have like some self-funded students who will pursue later for academic studies, but the majority for sponsored.
So two distinct markets there. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Find agencies in the market that they specialize in higher education, and some agencies specialize in language. We do both, but again, every agency, they have their strengths.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Anthony. We'll just give a moment to see if there are any more questions. Yep.
We do have another one. Do we know if there is any other country who intends to introduce taxes on education as an export industry? That's from Pascal.
Yeah. So Pascal's referring to the New Zealand story there, where schools for a few years prior to the pandemic, they paid a percentage of tuition fees as a levy to the government. I'm not aware of any other destinations that do things in exactly that way. There's Australia, which sort of takes the tuition fees and in a sort of secure deposit until the student starts the course, but that's not quite the same thing. Any other thoughts on that from anybody?
Yeah, there's one more question from
Okay, so we're not too sure if there's any other destinations for export education as an export industry in terms of a levy, but another one for Haitam: when sending students to unis, do they pay commission, or is it the student that pays a fee?
Okay, good question. It depends on the market. Like Generally, English-speaking market like UK, Australia, New Zealand, the US, they pay commissions. That's fine. A lot of European universities, which basically public universities, they have the fees very low, so they don't pay commission. So basically, we charge the students like a service fee.
So yeah, depends on the destination.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Busy on the questions today. Any more?
And nothing else coming through.
Liz, when you're coming to visit Saudi?
Me?
Yeah.
I'd love to.
You should bring more.
Send me the invitation.
Yeah. It's a good time to
No, I'd
visit
gladly come.
between November and April. The weather will be nice.
Yes, yes.
Haitam, I have
Very
a
awesome.
quick question, actually. Something that we haven't published yet, but I've seen in the last week that Saudi Arabia has itself, as an inbound destination, has just launched some sort of new student visa scheme. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, just starting now. It has been always, but now they made it more easier, and they are trying now to attract international students.
And is that something that you might get involved in as a?
We are still checking the options, see how that's going to work, but it's relatively new. So Saudi, they are promoting the inbound, like for tourists as well, and for students.
Yeah. Okay, let's see how things go.
Okay, well, that looks like it's the end of our audience Q&A, which brings us to the end of this week's Study Travel TV Live.
Our next episode will be on Wednesday, the 19th of October at the same time of 4 p.m. BST. You can visit the Study Travel TV Live page on the Study Travel Network, which you see on the screen there, under the magazine section in the menu. And on this page, we'll announce the guest speakers for the next broadcast, and you'll be able to access a recording of this episode from tomorrow, and you can see all the past episodes there.
So that's it for today. We'd like to say a big thank you to our special guests. Ilse, thank you for your time and your insights today.
My absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
Haitam, thank you for joining us again and sharing your thoughts, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you for having me. See you soon.
And thank you again to our sponsor this week, Londonist. And thanks everyone for watching. Goodbye.
Goodbye.